Hello everyone, Jonathan here. As you know, the question we like to ask on this series is, what is this weapon? Well, for I think the second time in the series, the answer is, we have absolutely no idea. So we've cheated. We've cheated the format. I'm hoping that some guesses came in on social media to help us out with this. I'm going to tell you what I think they might be. They're flintlock pistols, that much is obvious. And we can go a little bit further than that in terms of what they are based on, derived from, and then we can speculate a bit about what this is. We have two of them. This one's actually incomplete, but has a stock in better condition. And because we only have two, I'm showing you them both anyway. This one sadly has had old woodworm and has lost some wood to the stock there. But cards on the table, it wasn't me. This is very old damage, and it's intact, thankfully, but it is sadly. So between the two of them, we have an almost complete example of whatever the heck this is, although I will say they've both lost wood here under the barrel. This one to a lesser extent. So what have we got here? Well, the lock and the barrel on both are pattern 1716 sea service pistol parts, as is this side plate here. As a lot of you know, any sort of lock-based mechanism has to have something on the other side, even if it's just some metal cups to anchor the side nails, the bolts, the screws into. And traditionally that was a big metal plate. Now interestingly, the sea service side plates on these, turn it the right way around, are missing their belt hooks. Again, as some of you will know, one of the main features of a sea service pistol, as opposed to a land service pistol, is a belt hook. So you can clip this into your belt, run around on deck, do whatever you need to do, hoist sails, that kind of thing, pull out your pistol and use it. Cavalry pistols were stowed in holsters. Pirates, of course, did all sorts of crazy things, like tie them into silk scarves around their necks, which is amazing, but anyway, not official. Now, these were probably built from parts. Now, were they new parts? Were they already kind of surplus, condemned parts, and these were put together later? We don't know, unfortunately. But either way, they left off or removed the belt hook. So just to prove it on this one, which is in better condition but missing some parts, no belt hook there. Now, of course, it could have been taken off later, but I don't know why you would do that. These are intact otherwise, apart from the bits that are broken off or been lost. Incidentally, this is an old system of aluminium tags from the 1950s, 60s. A lot of our objects still have them on. We have not replaced this with a modern label, so it is kind of rattling around. It is a softer metal than the iron that this is attached to, so shouldn't do it any damage, but nonetheless, it's hardly modern museum best practice. So I just wanted to flag that. So we've got sea service pistol parts. Now the barrels have been cut down, and you can kind of see that from how thick the barrel walls are, because they've cut off the thin bit. Typically there's a taper, an external taper, on a barrel of this nature, and because it's been cut essentially, well, more than in half, and actually not very cleanly. Look at the angle on that. That's not square. It's just been like hacksawed off, whatever the 18th century equivalent of a hacksaw was. I'm not very good on tools. I suspect very similar. It's just been lopped off. It's been dressed off, but yeah, not amazing. You can see actually there how the bore is off center as well. When they reamed out these barrels, what mattered was that the bore itself was roughly parallel and straight. It didn't matter so much where it was in the barrel, if that makes sense. So this one is more centered, the other one is not. That's just a function of the barrels having been cut very far down. And you might well ask, why have they cut the barrels down so short? I don't know the answer to that either, disappointingly. The barrels have, they have the standard sort of moulding here, the tang secured by a screw at the breech. Well, the screw at the behind the breech. The markings are standard ordnance, so government military essentially, view and proof marks. So there's the GR crowned GR over the broad arrow, the standard broad arrow sort of ownership mark, but here it's part of a proof mark, and then a crowned crossed scepter mark as well. That's your proof and view marks. They're completely standard markings, don't really help us here at all. And then we have cross scepter and a crown on the tang. We have the crowned arrow inspection mark on the lock plate, the crowned GR for King George on the lock plate, cipher, standard again, and then a lockmaker's name, Smith, and the year 1747 on this one. Not massively relevant, except to show, sort of reinforces it's the era of the parts, and then all the same markings on here except for Tower and 1736. So that might imply later 18th century tinkering and parts that happen to be no longer fit for service. This is not at a time when parts are being stamped for sale out of service or as condemned, so we wouldn't know for sure whether they were surplus parts or brand new parts. I'm leaning toward this is done 1750 at the very earliest, and quite possibly later than that. So standard, slightly curved 1716 pattern sea service lock there with the ring neck cock. We have no other furniture, just the side plate. There's no butt cap. There's no trigger guard, importantly. And that brings us to the two significant features. One being the truly bizarre, steeply curved, bulbous stocks. Now these have clearly been carved for the purpose, from scratch, and the parts fitted to them. This is clearly not converted from an existing complete pistol or pistols. In lieu of the trigger guard, we do have metal plates there, iron plates for the tang screw to be inserted into, of different sizes. And then we have these wacky triggers, this is where we'll set this one aside because it's incomplete. Well, won't set it aside just yet. I will show you, well, first of all, the fact that there's something going on at the tip of this. So if you only had this one, you'd be going, that looks a bit funky. And then you'd notice two holes here in the great big butt. What are they? Well, thankfully, the other one has survived more intact, albeit with a wormed stock. And we can see that the holes accept a great big iron staple, which limits the travel of this huge curved trigger. And the missing bit off the end that has sort of been dovetail, well, not really dovetail, kind of, well, I think in this case, it's just been doubled back on itself with good old-fashioned blacksmithing. That one looks like it might even have been repaired. And then it's lost it again. Hard to say. Anyway, so what on earth are these things and how are they supposed to be held even? Well, the fact that they're converted from sea service pistols, frankly, may or may not be relevant. But I'm imagining a scenario in which grasping these things down here, further down the curve, as the staple might indicate. Now, you could, I suppose, speculate that this long curved trigger gives you more leverage for a better trigger pull, but if you get a better trigger pull, you get much worse ergonomics for holding and sighting the thing, so I don't think it can be that. And although the trigger pull on a flintlock pistol, a military flintlock pistol, might not be exactly light and crisp, this isn't going to help with that. This is clearly so that your hand can be positioned further down this insane curve here. And this spur here has to be for, I think, the little finger, because why would you be grasping the very end of this? That doesn't make much sense to me. So for me, the only way this works is little finger on there, the rest of the fingers up here, straddling that staple, which means if you were trying to hit a target, you'd be holding it like this. Clearly not in any way helpful. Not huge recoil on these, but it's still going to rotate in your hand. Wouldn't work. What this works out naturally as is about this. I can only speculate that these are for shooting over a wall or for shooting over the gunwale of a ship. So for repelling boarders. And you can even, without getting too sort of Pirates of the Caribbean on this, you can even imagine a scenario where you might have one in each hand. Because you know you can't see what you're shooting at anyway, and you're literally just putting it over the edge, pulling the trigger. And then, or more realistically, one after the other. If you have more than one in the first place, who knows? Wild speculation here, which we don't normally approve of here, but when you have weird experimental, these have to be experimental. There's no adoption of these. There's nothing written down about them that we know of. Maybe one day someone will find a mention of them. I think that's what they are. They're for shooting around corners, a little bit like the famous Sturmgewehr Krummlauf curved barrel attachment, or the US armoured personnel or armoured fighting vehicle port firing curved barrel weapons. Something like the Israeli corner shot, where it's a pistol, usually, pivoting on the front of a chassis with a camera. Obviously, there's no ability for a camera. No one's gone to the length of mirrors. That's the thing separating all of those I've just mentioned from these. There's no way to sight. You would literally be offering it up and firing it. Why would you bother when flintlock pistols already are curved and you could just shoot an ordinary pistol exposing only your knuckles? I don't think the Admiralty, let's assume that they're sea service or intended for sea service, I don't think the Admiralty or the War Office for that matter, Ordnance, gave enough of a monkeys about sailors' knuckles to justify this. And maybe that's the answer. Some bright spark quartermaster, armourer, sailor, who knows, got hold of some spare parts, manufactured pistols for shooting over things, presumably offered them to somebody in authority, and they went, nah. That's the best I can do. But they are fascinating. They are long-term old tower collection pieces. Probably no hope of ever divining the detail of this. But we can show them to you. You can join in with us and try and speculate what they are. Thank you for watching, guys. We do appreciate it. As always, check out our various social media channels, and if you feel moved to, we do have a donation link on the website as well. In terms of what's going on, we still have our Reloaded exhibition here in Leeds. That's until the end of June. And also in June, but early June, 6th of June, in time for D-Day, we will be having we'll be opening an exhibition at our Fort Nelson site, which for those of you who don't know is down on the south coast and is well worth a look at any time of year. But if you go in June, you'll be seeing some material dedicated to D-Day, which we're excited about. But we'll see you here again next week.